The first thing people noticed about Ivar Mikkelson's homestead was not the cabin. It was the hole, a wide, square wound in the earth, cut so deep that a man standing at the bottom looked swallowed by the land itself. It was not a well. It was not a root cellar. It was something else, something that made neighbors stop their wagons and stare in silence. While other settlers lifted logs toward the sky, Ivar kept digging down, as if the prairie itself had called him inside. Every morning, before the sun burned the frost off the grass, Ivar climbed into that hole with a shovel. Every evening, he climbed out covered in clay, his beard stiff with dried mud, his hands raw and shaking from the strain. He did not explain himself. He did not ask for help. He just dug. At the land office where settlers gathered to complain about wind, taxes, and each other, the jokes came easy. Cornelius Shaw laughed loudest. He told anyone who would listen that the Finnish immigrant was digging his own grave. Shaw had claimed the land next to Ivar's and had built a tall, proud sod house that he bragged could face down anything the Dakota sky could throw at it. A man who burrowed like an animal, Shaw said, had no place on the American prairie. Martha Whitmore wrote it all down. She was the settlement's unofficial historian, a quiet woman with sharp eyes and leather journals shipped in from Chicago. In September of 1881, she noted the strange construction. She wrote that general opinion held. The Finn had lost his sense from the summer heat. The doctor suggested sadness of the mind. Martha reserved judgment. By October, the hole had become something no one there had ever seen. Above ground, Ivar's cabin looked ordinary. Cottonwood logs, 16 by 20 feet, plain and sturdy. Nothing about it suggested madness. But beneath the wooden floor, hidden behind a hatch beside the fireplace, lay the reason for all the digging. An underground bedroom, built below the frost line, stone walls stacked with care. A timber ceiling, a proper bed with a straw mattress, a small iron stove set into the stone. While sensible people slept in rooms exposed to wind and snow, Ivar planned to sleep inside the earth. He had not come to this decision lightly. Winter had already taken too much from him. In Finland, in the flat frozen land of Ostrobothnia, winter had buried his family one by one. 3 children first, then his wife Annalie, taken by sickness after the cold had weakened her lungs. He had burned fires until the walls were hot. He had piled furs on their beds. He had prayed in a language he later tried to forget. None of it had been enough. When Annalie died in the spring of 1879, Ivar sold everything. He crossed the ocean and came to America with a single promise carved into his heart. He would never again lose someone to the cold. The Dakota land agent had called the territory gentle and welcoming. Ivar had known the lie the moment he stepped onto the plain. The land was flat, treeless, and open to every wind that wanted to kill. This place would breed winters worse than the ones that had already broken him. But land was cheap, and Ivar carried knowledge the others did not. His father had taught him during a brutal winter long ago, when trees cracked open from frozen sap. Their family had survived by retreating underground into a chamber dug beneath their farmhouse. While neighbors froze in their beds, the earth had held steady, warm enough to keep breath moving in the chest. That knowledge had saved him once. He intended to use it again. When Samuel Ironwood, a trader who passed through with goods from the north, stopped to watch the digging, he asked what everyone else was thinking. "You're building what now? Sleeping room?" Ivar said carefully, choosing each English word like a tool. "Below frost, earth stays same temperature. Winter cannot reach." Ironwood frowned, then nodded slowly. He had seen earth lodges built by native people half buried, warm when snow covered the plains. "Old knowledge," he said. Ivar agreed. Old ideas kept people alive. New ones killed them faster. Cornelius Shaw did not agree. He told his wife that the Finn was not right in the head, that no man with sense would live like a badger. He said Ivar would come begging for shelter before winter was done. Prudence Shaw said nothing. She had already lost feeling in 3 toes from a past winter, and understood that pride did not keep a body warm. The work took 6 weeks. Ivar measured everything, 10 feet deep to reach safe earth, but 12 feet square for space without risking collapse. He dug alone because no one would help a project they believed was foolish. Each shovel of dirt was a small victory. Each stone placed in the wall was a promise whispered to the dead. The hardest part was hauling the stones. The creek lay 2 miles away. Each rock weighed as much as a child. Ivar made the trip again and again, his small cart groaning under the load. He chose smooth river stones, knowing they would hold heat and shed moisture. He worked until his muscles screamed, until his hands bled, until the walls rose solid and sure. He explained the design to anyone who asked, though few did. The stones would soak up heat from the stove and release it slowly through the night. They would draw moisture away from the room and carry it toward a drainage pit. The earth itself would keep the temperature steady, 52 degrees, summer or winter. A place where water did not freeze and men did not die. The doctor came to examine him, sent by worried neighbors. He said 52 degrees was not warm. Ivar agreed. Warm was not the goal. Alive was. From a steady start, a small fire could do the rest. From deep cold, even a large fire could fail. By November, the underground bedroom was finished. Curiosity finally overcame laughter. People climbed down the ladder to see for themselves. They expected damp darkness. They found something else. A clean, quiet space that smelled of stone and dried herbs. The walls curved gently, holding the room like open hands. The stove warmed the stones, and the stones warmed the air. The bed looked inviting. The silence felt safe. "It's warmer than my own room," Martha admitted, surprised by the truth of it. Cornelius Shaw came last, climbing down with clear reluctance. He dismissed it afterward as a comfortable hole, but his voice lacked its former confidence. January came anyway. On the morning of January 12, 1882, the day felt mild. Children walked to school without heavy coats. The sky held no warning. By afternoon, the temperature fell like a dropped stone. Wind rose without mercy. Snow turned the air white and solid. Within hours, the world disappeared. The blizzard came so fast that people did not have time to be afraid until it was too late. This was the storm that would later be called the Children's Blizzard. It would kill hundreds across the territories. It would erase roads, farms, and lives in a single night. And while the wind screamed above the prairie, Ivar Mikkelsen slept underground. Wrapped in blankets, the stone walls around him warm and steady. As the earth did what it had always done, held. Ivar did not wake when the storm reached its worst. The earth above him absorbed the fury in silence. Wind tore across the prairie, but 10 feet below, the sound became a dull, distant pressure, like waves striking the hull of a buried ship. The small iron stove burned low and steady. The stone walls gave back the heat they had stored through the evening. The air stayed calm. The temperature barely changed. Above ground, the world was ending. By mid-afternoon, the sky had turned the color of iron. Snow flew sideways, driven by wind so strong it stripped breath from lungs. Visibility vanished. A man could not see his own hands. The cold came down fast, faster than anyone believed possible. Within 3 hours, the temperature dropped more than 40 degrees. People panicked. School teachers faced terrible choices. Some sent children home, believing familiar paths could be trusted. Others locked doors and prayed. On the open prairie, fences disappeared. Houses vanished behind curtains of white. Sound itself seemed to die. Cornelius Shaw stepped out to check his barn and passed the process. The night, 40 feet, a distance he had crossed every day of his life. The wind struck him like a wall. Snow blinded him instantly. He turned in what he thought was the right direction, then another, then another. The world had no landmarks anymore. No up, no down, just white and pain. He walked until his legs failed. He collapsed against wood he did not recognize. He reached for a latch he could not find. By morning, he was frozen where he sat, inches from his own front door. Others fought the cold with fire. Families burned furniture, beds, doors. anything that would catch. Flames roared while the walls creaked and bent under the weight of snow piling higher than the roof. Some survived the night. Many did not. The storm did not care. In his underground bedroom, Ivar dreamed of Finland, of snow pressed against small windows, of his children's breathing in the dark. He woke once, fed the stove a small piece of wood, and lay back down. The thermometer nailed to the stone wall read 60 degrees. He slept again. When morning came, it came without sound. Ivar climbed a ladder and pushed at the cabin door. It did not move. Snow had packed against it like a wall. He dug for nearly an hour before cold air rushed in. The prairie outside no longer looked like land. It was a flat white desert, broken only by the tops of fences and the dark shapes of half-buried roofs. The silence frightened him more than the storm. His first thought was for the animals. He moved to the underground stable he had dug beside his bedroom. The goats bleated softly. The cow shifted in the straw. Alive. Hungry, but alive. Relief hit him so hard his knees weakened. Only then did he begin to understand that something was wrong. He walked toward the nearest homestead, the Henderson place. Smoke should have been rising. There was none. He forced open the door and stepped inside. The air was dead cold. The stove sat empty and black. The furniture was gone, burned to ash. On the floor, the Henderson children lay together beneath every blanket the family owned. Their faces were peaceful, as if sleep had simply deepened into something final. The parents sat by the stove, hands folded, waiting for warmth that never came. Ivar backed out of the cabin and stood in the snow, his breath shaking. The old pain rose again, sharp and familiar. He moved on, dread growing heavier with each step. He found more bodies. Too many. Neighbors he had spoken to days before, now frozen where they had fallen. The storm had not spared strength or pride or good intentions. It had taken whoever stood in its way. By the time he stopped searching, something inside him had cracked. A week later, the survivors gathered at the land office. 19 chairs sat empty. The room smelled of damp wool and grief. People spoke softly, if at all. Then Ivar walked in. He looked wrong to them. His face held color. His hands were steady. He did not move like a man who had spent the blizzard fighting for his life. Eyes turned toward him, filled with questions that bordered on anger. "How are you alive?" a man demanded. A father who had lost a son. Ivar did not defend himself. He did not boast. He told the truth in simple words. "I slept underground," he said. Earth stayed warm. Storm passed above. The room went quiet. Martha Whitmore opened her journal with shaking hands. She read her own words aloud. The notes she had written months before. Words that had once sounded strange now rang like warning bells ignored. Someone began to cry. Someone else pounded a fist against the wall. Grief twisted into something sharper. "Teach us," Martha said finally. "Please." Ivar nodded once. Winter was not finished yet. Ivar did not speak of blame. He did not remind them who had laughed, who had doubted, who had called him mad. The dead already carried enough weight. Instead, he taught. As soon as the winds eased and travel became possible, he began walking from homestead to homestead. He carried no plans on paper, only measurements stored in his head and lessons carved into him by loss. He showed them where to dig, how deep was deep enough, and why stopping too soon meant death dressed as comfort. Depth came first. 4 feet was not enough. 6 feet was a gamble. 10 feet reached safety. Below that line, the earth no longer obeyed the sky. It held its own rules, steady and patient. Drainage came next. Water was as dangerous as cold. He showed them how to slope the floor, how to build a gravel pit to drink the moisture before it could rot wood or freeze breath. A dry, underground room was a living room. A damp one was a grave waiting to happen. Then stone. Not any stone. Smooth river stone, dense and rounded. Stones that could hold heat like memory and release it slowly through the long night. He showed them how to stack without rushing, how each piece supported the next. The walls were not just barriers. They were storage for warmth. Ventilation mattered. Air had to move or sickness would come quietly. Fresh air in low, used air out high. The stovepipe did double work, pulling breath through the room while carrying smoke away. No machines, no tricks. Just the way warm air always behaved. Families listened like people who had already paid the price for ignorance. The digging began while the ground was still hard and cruel. Men swung picks until their shoulders burned. Women hauled dirt in frozen buckets. Children carried stones too small for adults to bother with. No one complained. The memory of January lived in their muscles. Martha Whitmore wrote everything down. She measured, sketched, and copied Ivar's words into clean pages. She titled the work carefully, knowing names carried power. She sent copies beyond the settlement, to places she would never see. By the time spring broke, the earth opened again. 7 underground bedrooms were finished. The next winter came hard, though not as sudden. Wind screamed, snow piled high. But this time, when night fell, lamps burned underground, fires stayed small. People slept without fear. No one with an underground room lost fingers or toes. No one froze in their bed. Word spread. New settlers were warned before they built. Dig first, they were told. Learn from the dead. The strange Finn who once drew laughter became the man everyone sought before lifting a single log. Ivar never smiled much, but he showed patience. Teaching did not bring his family back, but it gave their deaths meaning. He never remarried. He never filled the quiet inside him. But each winter morning, when hatches opened and people climbed up alive, he felt something close to peace. Years later, the settlement itself faded. Drought came. Families moved on. Buildings collapsed. But beneath the empty prairie, stone rooms remained. Cool in summer, warm in winter. Proof buried in silence. The storm that killed the children was remembered as a warning. And the man who hid from winter underground was remembered as the one who listened when the earth spoke. When winter comes to kill, the land already knows how to protect you. You only have to go low enough to hear it.